hear the chair. And we will have the roll call and certification of the quorum by Sid. Thank you.
Town of Ashland, Miss Amos.
Here.
Goochland County, Mr. Goyne.
Here.
Mr. Coleman. Yukon County, Miss Inman.
Present.
Charles City County, Mr. Mitchell. Let's see. Hanover County, Mr. Vidunes. Mr. Hardman. Powhatan County, Mr. Chardine. Chesterfield County, Miss Smith.
Here.
Miss Walker.
Here.
Henrico County, Mr. Ure.
Here.
Miss Smidler.
Here.
City of Richmond, Chair Clark.
Here.
And let's see. And that should conclude roll call, or is there another list? Just want to make sure.
No, I think you're good. And we have Hanover on.
Mr. Vidunes.
Here.
Okay.
VDOT is also here, Sid. Thanks.
Oh, my apologies. Yes. VDOT Ms. Macadori.
She's here, but it's Sarah logged in because of technical difficulties. Apologies.
No worries. Sounds good. Plan RVA, Mr. Bushing.
Here.
And CVTA, Mr. Parsons.
Here. Thanks, Sid.
No problem.
Thank you. It does sound like we have a quorum, so we will keep moving on this morning. Considerations for any amendments to our meeting agenda today? Hearing none, let's move on to the approval of our CVTA TAC minutes. Do we have a motion to approve our April 8th CVTA TAC meeting minutes?
This is Austin. I'll move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Goyne. Second. Anyone?
Smidler, second.
Thank you, Henrico. Ms. Smidler. All right, all those in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. Hearing none, that motion passes and moves. It's time for our open public comment period. Sid, do we have anyone online or signed up to speak virtually for today's meeting?
No, we do not.
Okay. Little scratchy throat. So Barb, anytime I get a coughing spell, you have to take over for me. All right. So I don't have a chairman's report today, other than we should have a very exciting conversation in regard to our parking lot list and the revisions to the allocation framework. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Ms. Walker for her to walk through the presentation. And I think that all of you should have received this information prior to the meeting. And so if there's nothing further, Ms. Walker.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Afternoon, everybody. I feel like we have low energy. Exciting parking lot items. We are making our way through the list. Let me share my screen. And let me make sure I can see y'all's faces over here. Okay. Y'all can see my screen. Got it. Okay, great. So we met last month in April. I'm just going to jump right in. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but we are making our way through our list last month. This was the agenda from last month. We only have 40 minutes, so I want to be conscious of that. 107. So from last month, we're going to pick this up, this topic of how we consider regional benefit only versus benefit costs. but we'll circle back on that item, but we did manage the green items are my shorthand notes of resolution on some of these parking lot items. So we had talked about, adjusting funding requests through the process, and we decided that didn't warrant updating the framework, but that the schedule would allow us time to work through changes in funding requests, acknowledging that the process is a little bit iterative when we get to reviewing scores and selecting projects. So we decided that didn't warrant updating the framework. We talked about project readiness and how should we account for that. We said the process needed to remain flexible and dependent on the source. So where we landed with respects to readiness was we didn't think we needed to update the framework necessarily, but the application process already asked the sponsors to include their leveraging plan and list the sources, and that VDOT DRPT, if needed, would be available to help assess readiness. That's kind of how it played out last time when we dug into the projects. VDOT kind of weighed in from their perspective on readiness. So we'll talk about readiness as we move through the process, but we didn't think it warranted updating the framework document. Leveraging didn't warrant again updating the framework. We're just going to include leveraging. I think this was specific to knowing which projects would be leveraging funds. So we're going to include that in the scorecard when it comes out. So when we are assessing which projects to select, we know which ones have some leveraging funds. We talked about broadly as a term for determining picking a project, how well is the project supported by other localities, and we thought that was a technical measure, so we weren't going to try to structure that in the framework in any way. That kind of works itself out through the process. So we reviewed the schedule that Chet had proposed, and I think we were pretty much good with the schedule. It backed up the window to July where we take projects in. I think we modified this from maybe December to November. We backed that up saying that TAC members, when the scores are available, at least the benefit scores, we would start to review them as early as we could in November. And then I think we backed this up a month to December. So this is our schedule, our new schedule for receiving new project applications. And then we talked about cost validation and project scoring as a way to those tasks occurring concurrently in the process so that we have enough time to vet the scoring and work through the project selection process. So trying to have these items work concurrently together. So those are some topics we've kind of worked through. So today's agenda, circling back to in step 4, project selection, how do we had some discussion on how would we consider benefit only versus benefit cost. We'll talk through that here shortly, and then we'll move to project submissions and how do we handle off-year submissions for existing projects that are underway and off-year submissions when we have new project requests that come in off years. So how are we going to handle that process? So open for discussion, you guys. We talked about kind of how things played out. We have the benefit to cost ratio per the code. We consider BC. We saw how that kind of shook out. We have the guidelines in the framework document that considers mix of projects, some other items, but ultimately we wind up going back and looking at how the projects ranked by benefit only as well. So we had in our last discussion, did we need to update the framework document to reflect a more, I don't know, a different way of considering benefit only. So did we think we needed to consider weighting benefit somehow, or scoring it differently, some sort of weight to putting on the benefit only scores. So right now we just have benefit cost. You can sort benefit only by category, but then there was some discussion on should we be weighting the benefit only scores when we're considering which projects to select. Or are we good with just reviewing the benefit only rankings and kind of vetting that as a group? I guess I'll open it up to you guys on thoughts on benefit only and how we consider that when we're vetting the projects for selection. Hey, Chet.
Thanks, Chessa. Good summary. I think just a little bit more of the background. So we've gone through 3 rounds now. No rounds have been decided based on the scores
Right.
only. So we've got that to assume that it's going to continue like that.
Yep.
So I don't think we're going to have a solve everything framework.
Yep.
But as you said, we do provide the benefit scores by category. And like the only other thing is the code requires the BC to be a factor in the decision-making process, but it doesn't drive it. So I think based on what we have right now in the framework, the ability to see the benefit scores alongside the BC scores is going to continue as long as we're doing that, the BC. So I think that's there for TAC, for Finance Committee, for the full authority, so that they can see, everybody can see that transparently from the get-go. But that doesn't account for your question about weighting. I'm really curious what people think about that.
All right. Others. So right now, the way it stands is benefit to cost score projects will be ranked by category, and we'll do the same, provide the same rankings, but by benefit only to all the groups for review. Amy?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I think, for me, I guess it says something if we're going through this process and ranking projects based on the benefit cost, but yet that's not what we're funding. So that kind of says to me that we have some kind of disconnect in terms of what's being asked for, from our, policy makers versus what we're able to score, right? So to me, there seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect. And how can we move the needle toward presenting something to the Finance Committee and the board that's more in line with what we think should be funded? And it seems to me that just on this last process, and I've only been through one, so that's my perspective on it. But the benefit cost did not yield what anybody felt comfortable with saying yes to, right? So I think that when you look at the benefit score itself, the benefit score, and Miles, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's driven largely by the travel demand model, right? That looks at regional benefits. So under each one of the categories, the measures, they have their own unique score that gets combined up to the one benefit score, right? So you have to kind of drill down a little bit to see how each project is performing in each one of those measures. So like throughput or travel time is really a regional measure as an output of that model. And that to me is as fair as you can get, right? Without any sort of bias or anything coming in from any one individual or, you know, it is what it is, if we agree with the model. So to me, I feel like that says something about the project, in and of itself, excluding the cost piece of that. Cost obviously comes into that. But are we trying to fund projects that have true regional benefit? Then the model and the output of that benefit measure or that benefit score is the best sort of reflection of what that project is going to yield from the regional perspective. So how we can weight that and what that would look like, I think, is a big topic, another whole topic of discussion in terms of how we would measure that, how we would weight that. And would it be weighted based on subcategory, like sub-performance measure, right? Not just performance measure, you know, rolled up, but underneath the different performance measures, there might be a weighting. So I just throw that out just as for conversation and what I've observed, but that may be the best way of gauging how regional these projects truly are.
Thanks, Amy. I think the first thing I'll start off with is we're required by law to do the cost. Let me make sure I get it here. The benefit cost ranking. So we have to do that. And I think that what we're trying to do is provide the authority members with as much flexibility and information as we can. Because I can say that none of us are the reason that what our process outputted, none of us are the reason why they did get funded or didn't get funded. It's clearly the authority members. And then also, so I think having the information and letting the tax see it, the finance and the authority see it, could have some benefit. I think it's gonna really still create that conversation to say, hey, how do we fund what the region needs? But I can also say that when we get to the process of which project is more regional than the other, I think that we're going to come into problems. And what we've done is with the selection criteria is that you aren't, if you get into the bunch, minus the wild cards, then it's regional. And so we know that in nature, and if we want to exclude those, then of course we would revisit the wild card exclusion. But otherwise, every project that we do has, through the scoring criteria, it's regional based on the definitions that we set forth. And again, we have to leave that flexibility because people are going to come in and we know that, you know, what is potentially impactful to the region to one, and somebody else may have another project that they come into leadership that they think is the same. So we're working, you know, we're trying to be using Henrico's, Mr. Thornton's word, collegial, when we're developing these processes so that we can really take on all of those changing things that will happen, you know, when we're gone and for the duration of the authority. And again, I think there may be other leadership that doesn't want that flexibility. They want us to crank out the projects. And again, that benefit cost does yield its way to funding a lot of smaller projects. And so there's a lot to think about. And again, those authority members can see that information and decide. So we're trying to maintain our technical aspect. Although we know at times we become staff to our delegates and authority members themselves in asking, okay, what really works for this specific locality? And so again, I would be against putting in any additional weighting myself, just stating my opinion in regard to benefit only. I think I would be remiss to say, can we begin to think about it? I just don't know if that's like an annual update or if that's something we need to work on in the next year to see what it is that overhaul, because I think Chet would be happy for that. So there's not that we are totally against it. I just think that these authority members want that flexibility in decision making with everything put in front of them. And that's what we did. And then they came back with some changes in every round that we've done. So that's all I have to say. I'll yield the floor to others with their hand up. Austin and then Todd.
Yeah, thank you. I'll kind of echo some of your points to run, and what Chet was saying is I don't think we'll ever get this perfect or right, so to speak. It'll always be something we're chasing as far as the what the finance committee and what the overall authority want to do is going to be different from what staff recommends, no matter how we change the framework. I did a quick addition project, and the top 4 benefit only projects would have taken 172 million of the 195, almost 195 that we ended up allocating at the full requests of the or at the time of application. That's my concern and Goochland's concern overall with going to a weighting or a benefit only scenario is I do think we still need to allow that flexibility, but cost have to be taken into consideration to some degree, because that 172 would have been sucked up to only go to 4 total projects. While very beneficial projects, I certainly cannot argue they don't provide any benefit. I mean, clearly they scored well, but that would leave only $22 million for the rest of us. And just want to make sure that we're taking it all into consideration, because we want to make sure that the tax dollars are spent as best as possible in the most efficient way possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question may be for Chet initially with a follow-up. So the current cost benefit, the cost is based on the CVTA ask only, correct?
That's correct.
So not to add more data for processing and looking at, but it may be value to the group and to the CVTA elected members that if we look at the total cost, we're looking at benefit as another data point, not necessarily as the data point, but if especially on projects that we're leveraging, maybe that kind of gives some context as to the value of the project benefits relative to the total cost, since we'd be tying up money if we funded something that's gonna have leverage money. We tie it up for potentially two funding cycles while we seek other funding. So I think it's a good data point and informative if we kind of see where that project ranks relative to the total cost of it.
And so Todd, are you saying once, say, a locality adjusts their funding request, so say like, everybody did, thank you all again, where we all had to reduce, are you saying we rerun the benefit cost analysis to see what that looks like with those adjusted costs? I'm a little bit confused on what you're saying there.
No, I'm saying, so let's say there's a $50 million project, but somebody only asked for 5 million to leverage. So the cost benefit ranking that is provided to the CVTA is what is the cost benefit for that ask, correct, Chet? So we're tending to maybe favor leveraging, which is good, but I think to help make a better formed decision, what is the benefit cost based on that total $50 million for that project? Not that that's the only basis we use for ranking and funding, but as a yet another data point that helps inform those decisions of the full authority.
Got it. So what do we think about that? I mean, I guess maybe we could have, I don't know, do we want like a test scenario where they take the current request and just we kind of see how it pans out? Maybe we have that for our next meeting.
I mean, that's easy enough.
I mean, yeah, that's not an issue in terms of the data presented. I mean, that could be an easy, just add another column and provide another data point. So, I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, but I think it'll help, just inform us on like what it does to the movement. And that may, I don't know if that'll achieve what Amy's trying to accomplish, but it does give an additional outlook or information for the authority to consider. I'm gonna go to Barb and then Amy.
Yeah, I guess I want to see a test case. I don't really see how seeing benefit with the total cost is gonna help the decision, versus the benefit with the request. But maybe it'll make more sense in a test case.
Yeah, we can see if it does any movement. And then if it really doesn't do any, let's not give them more work.
Yeah, because the benefit kind of gets that regional, trying to capture the regional projects. I don't know.
Yeah, and if I could, Amy, if I could
Go ahead.
just hop in
Yeah.
real quick,
Sure.
just as a reminder, when we did how we landed with the framework the way we did. So, because we're debating how we consider benefit only, because benefit to cost wasn't exactly where we thought we should be. So we made some modifications. So if we look at just benefits, again, it's a challenge to sort out the most regional projects. And I'm just echoing what Goin and Dharana, you were saying, that the reason why we group the projects by category is because a highway project and a transit project aren't apples to apples in the way that they're scored. So it's hard we all agreed that that was too difficult trying to score them the same way. So we categorize them and compare them to themselves. And then we said, well, but then how are we going to know if you rank them by category, which projects are we then going to, how far down the list in each one are you going to go? So in the framework, we set up this guideline. It's just a guideline. Once you rank them, then you distribute the funds roughly proportionate to the total value being requested in each project category. So if 30% of our ask was in highway, then we'll go down the list based on that amount. And so what we're talking, and we can do the same thing with benefit. I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's difficult to get into a sub measure and try to pull out, of these MOEs, these performance measures between transit and a regional bike, a regional trail and I don't know what other, some other category, but to go into a particular MOE and then compare it again across categories because they're scored differently. So
I don't know that Todd was suggesting that.
no, I wasn't speaking to that. I was just speaking in general I'm sorry, I went back to the Amy's suggestion on.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Sorry.
I was just kind of putting that out there as discussion because
mean,
when we left the last meeting,
Okay.
we were talking about what's a regional project. right? And I think some people said, well, if localities come together, and this might have been in the, locality support conversation that we were sort of having at the end of the last discussion, and
Yeah.
what is really a regional project, right? What gives the most regional benefit? That's sort of where I recall where we left off. And what I was saying then, and what I still believe to be true, is that the model, from what I understand, in working with Miles and Chet on that really does demonstrate what the regional benefit is of that project. It's not subjective. It's a model driven output, right? So to me, that's good, right? Obviously, we have to look at the cost benefit, because that's what's required. But that hasn't yielded what the region has wanted to actually fund. So all I'm trying to do, and what we've discussed on my side, is just what would move the needle more towards something that is more reflective of what the board might want to have, funded. So, and if it is just, this is a political decision, then, and I'm kind of hearing, Dorona, that's sort of where you're going, is that you're wanting to just leave this wide, pretty much wide open, and let the politics sort of play out. But again, that came back to the TAC. That didn't happen at finance. That didn't happen at the board. That came right back to TAC in a 3.5-hour, very difficult meeting. Okay. And I don't think, to me, that is in the spirit of leaving it up to the board. The board ultimately approved it, but they sent it back to us to work it out.
Yeah, and I think that was I think, Amy, we've seen it both ways, actually. We've seen all three examples that you just named.
Mhm.
We've seen where tax said no, and it still went to the finance, and the finance committee said yes.
Mhm.
We've seen where TAC, the first year, TAC, it didn't come back to the TAC, it came back to, I think it went to the county administrators working group, and then they looked at it. So we just happened to be the pick this time, but we weren't
Okay.
picked the previous
Okay.
times. So we didn't really have an idea that we were going
Right.
to get picked this time.
Okay. All right.
And so, yeah, I totally hear you. And I think that with some of our timing changes,
Mhm.
one
Yeah.
of the big things this year is nobody saw what everybody
Right.
else inputted.
Exactly.
And I think that that's an important part to the process.
Agreed.
We do it in competitiveness,
Mhm.
and then we had to look at it in a short period of time. And I think with now the enhanced time frame, everybody's going to see it, and it may work a lot better. It's just that no one had seen it. Everybody was freaking out that it was just going to move forward as it was.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's where
It
they
came
just
back.
kicked it back to us.
Okay. And that's fair. That's fair. But, anyway, that was my point in the whole conversation about the benefit. Not that I'm trying to steer it one way or the other. But I do think what yielded in the benefit cost analysis fell short. Whether it can be improved upon or whether it needs to be improved upon is the point of this conversation.
Yeah, and I think that even that, maybe like we talked about early on with regard to, have we put into this process I think we did, but the reevaluation of the dollar amount. So like that didn't happen last year for us. We didn't have a chance to lower any projects.
Right.
So that was a different approach as well.
Mhm.
And so, we have to think about that, which only happens after you see what's been submitted.
Mhm.
Unless in the beginning we're going to say don't submit a project over X amount of dollars.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the only thing we're going to be yielded with next. And so then and yeah, so I definitely think that the first thing we do, like I said, is the benefit cost because of the code. And I think that is a little smart scale-ish, but that's what the legislators could get approved and everybody agreed on. So so I think it has a lot of those moving parts that we don't have any control over. And like I said, a lot of times we're going to try our best to be as technical as possible and then, you know, they're going to make whatever decision that they want to make. And we are just, you know, we're a part of it, which is a blessing, even to be a part of the framework of the authority. And so we kind of take our assignments as we get them. And one of the things they said is that we got to look at this every year. So this year, like I said, we've had the most participation from all localities. So it's really starting to get tougher and tougher to get it right. But I think that we're still moving in the right direction, because I know, again, maintaining that flexibility, everybody will benefit from that. Maintaining that flexibility has gotten us the wild card, which is going to substantially help, you know, everyone, especially our rurals that have problems. So we're trying to make, you know, apples and oranges work together right now. And so far, I think we've been doing good. It isn't ideal, but we've made it work. I'm gonna go to Jet. I have a Jet here, Chet. Sorry. I'm gonna go to Chet and then Austin.
Actually, I'll yield to Austin. I think his hand was raised first.
Okay, sorry, Austin.
Oh, okay, it wasn't, but thank you. I'll just kind of reiterate one thing, Darona, you said that it's we are, I think it was you or Amy. We are kind of proxies to a certain extent of our politicians. I know we were that day, the second meeting in was it February or March, where we had to redo the list, so to speak. So we do get involved to some degree in the political side of it. But I do think that the way it's set up and the intent of the legislation and the original framework is very smart scale-ish, just like you mentioned. So it's, to me, I think with the additional time, the framework as it's currently written works. I think the process worked as intended last time. My intent is for it to not really change substantially in the benefit scoring process, and pretty much exactly how it worked this last round. Yeah, it was kind of a pain, but I do think the additional time frame, I think, does allow a lot more thought and a lot more intentional thought maybe given to some of the conversation. It probably could have prevented a lot of the 3.5 hours that we spent all on one wonderful Zoom call. So yeah, I guess my intent is for it to kind of remain unchanged with that additional time frame, I think, allowing us to better vet it.
Thank you. Chet?
Yeah, same. I think that the schedule, adding a couple months into the schedule will help, because TAC will have more time to have this kind of discussion. My sense is that the data sets and the process that's laid out in the framework works for the most part. I haven't heard anybody have issues with the actual data points that we're looking at, the performance measures. So I think all of that is there. I think if I was going to be able to go back and do anything differently, it was when before finance committee started talking about it, that we clearly communicated the benefit scores along with the benefit cost scores. Because, I mean, the focus was, after we left that meeting, was back on what's the regional benefit. We already have that. That's part of the outputs already, but we just didn't focus on that in the presentation of the projects. So I think we've got the tools we need. It's just a matter of organizing it and figuring out how to talk about it in the way that puts everybody on the same page. So I like where this is going.
So I'm going to politely strike through this from what I'm hearing in terms of recreating some formula or weighting focused on benefit only. And y'all speak up, and what I'm hearing is more folks say to let the process play out, allow more time for it. We can also bring back another data point that's using information we already have, but that we don't necessarily want to rework, come up with a new factor or formula focused on benefit only.
That's what I heard too.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, it's 1:42.
Oh my goodness.
I know. We did good though. We got somewhere with this. So existing project and new projects
yeah.
off year. So what do y'all want to do? Y'all want to punt to June? What What, it's
No, I
142.
think this one, didn't we have like some suggestions on this one, Chessa?
Yep,
I
so,
think that's worth sharing.
okay. All right, so,
And this is the chair and vice chair meeting to go over our agenda. We're such prepared folks. And we just kind of talked through, I think all of us, I think what we had in general is that we could easily probably solve, not easily, but somewhat solve our existing projects. And we may need to figure out how we want to do new projects. And this is being off year cycle.
right,
Because like we said, we know, there's somebody who's going to come with a huge factory that's going to change them. It's in an off year of CVTA and they need CVTA money. So I think we need a little bit conversation on that, but let's quickly, Chessa, address
Yeah.
the existing and see
Okay.
what if we can get a check on that.
So this should be existing. I believe we did existing first. So what we have in the framework now, the existing language we have is that CVTA regional funding cycle is non-smart scale years or odd years. And on the off year or the alternating year, funding requests for existing projects will be considered. So non-smart scale year, sorry, alternating year, sponsors can request, we're trying to clarify, sponsors can request funding for an existing project in an off-cycle year, including leveraging, and that staff will then check to see what funds are available in the year needed and try to review the programming to see if it's possible. Are there funds available? How can reprogramming funds if there's even a path um, before TAC even hears the request further. Right, Chet? Did I get that right? That's what we kind of talked about. You guys would see what the available funding looks like, and then let TAC know, and then we would go from there.
That's right.
Okay. We also said for existing projects, the question was, are we going to allow for additional leveraging requests to come in an off-cycle year, as an example for if you were trying to put together a match because you got a federal grant and you need more money. And the thought was that, yes, things are going to happen. People are going to need to come in and make a request. And that we would allow existing projects to come in for additional funding requests in the off years. So thoughts on existing projects? I guess I could read through these real quick. Oh, I just said, go ahead, Barb. Oh, I just said that.
That next
Okay.
session is new projects, right? So we're just focusing on existing right now.
Yes, this is new. You're right.
So let's say there are 5 requests for additional funds, or 5 requests for additional funds.
Mm-hmm.
And I ought to know this, right? We talked about it. So they'll get inserted into the previous round's spreadsheet, like with a new calculation of benefit cost, so we can see where it falls.
Yep.
So if someone had a $50 million project that had gotten 10 million and now they want 30 million more, we'll see where that kind of falls. Okay.
That's what I assume we would do. Yep. Amy, thoughts on existing projects?
Yeah, so I guess if we have an existing project and somebody wants to come back for additional funding, what's the process for that? And is there going to be a time frame, or is it just ad hoc? Anytime somebody wants additional funding, you just submit it. I think there needs to be some parameters about when that time is open, and also it needs to follow the deobligation. So that projects that, and I know that's on another agenda item, but that's where we're gonna have money, right? Because in theory, we've already programmed out all of the money through the regular cycle. So the only money that's gonna be available is money that's freed up from the obligated funding or some other windfall of funding comes available. So I guess that's where timing of that request is gonna matter and process for that. So I guess that's a question I have just generally.
So we were thinking this, we would have this cycle for off year cycle. It wouldn't, you'd have to submit in the window. It
Okay.
wouldn't just be any time of year.
Yeah,
It would
very,
have-
very similar to the new project request cycle.
So there would be a schedule to when we would take those requests in. And then we were starting to vet, and like you said, what's the narrative? So an existing project comes in, there's some short form asking, shouldn't be very difficult to
Yep.
submit an application for. We already have it. And then there needs to be an understanding of why it can't wait till the regular new project. Well, I guess it's not a new project, but the why, the timing, other sources, kind of the narrative behind it would need to be submitted with your short form so we could understand the request. And then I guess that would come back to TAC. Chet, you would report back to TAC, we got this request. Here's available funds or not. And then we talk through the narrative on the request
Right.
as TAC.
Yeah, that's the step in between. So staff would get the intake of the project request, the existing funding supplement or whatever we want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Staff would process that, make sure there's funding available in the year requested, and then bring that information to TAC so TAC could have the discussion to decide whether that was a worthwhile expenditure or other type of thing.
Okay, so for existing projects, I'm just gonna, you would,
Yeah, I think that's still there. You're number one. Just add in another one where staff, before that, where staff, yeah,
for this one?
maybe flip them.
Okay, so first you check.
Right. There's no point wasting your time
Yeah.
if there's no money.
Okay, so now you're talking about existing projects that are not going to be submitted in July.
Maybe I shouldn't say out of cycle. I'll just say whatever
This
you
is
want to call it.
still even year,
Right.
Yeah,
non,
what do you want to call it? Off year?
yeah, off year. I'd say off year
Okay.
and not cycle.
So an existing project comes in July in the window. An existing projects, staff checks to see if there's money available. If not, opportunities to reprogram funds, ?
And can I ask one other question? What if it seems like you need to be on your game and anticipate or have a lot of contingency on a project once you're ready or getting close to advertising? Are we going to accept request for funding to be able to award a construction contract and if that request is not within this window?
Yeah, because that's going to hit any time of year. Because right now we're just talking about a set window, this set schedule.
So either you build in a whole bunch of bid risk contingency and hope you're still within that, or which could just tie up money.
This seems more like a CVTA local use
Yeah,
to me
agreed.
for
bids?
emergency need. Yes, with the bids.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to put a note here just to put it.
no existing project requests except for within the window.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So if you bids come in out of cycle, then you gotta figure it out. Okay, so funds are available. Do we need to spend time on chat reports about requests came in, 5 requests come in? We can't accommodate all 5 in the funding available. It comes back to TAC to talk about that.
Right.
Okay.
And I think if I could just take a second, I think something that everybody should be aware of is that our goal is not to have any money available,
Right.
right? We want to have all the money, awarded to regional
Exactly.
projects that's going to be put to good use. So if there is money left over, part of what we're doing is reinvesting it for a 6 to 12 month period. So staff is going to have to be, I think we're going to have to be more on top of the actual, flexible funds that are available in each program year. And I mean, we want to be upfront with that. So that's part of that last 3 bullets there, Chessa, is to make sure that we're able to communicate at the staff level if there is any money at all for these requests to start with.
Well, if I may, that's sort of my point in terms of the timing and the deobligation. Because I don't, like I said, I don't know where all, like, the money is obligated, right? Unless a project has gone through its 2 years and the locality has deobligated that funding, then that frees up the money to go back into the pot. And that would be, in theory, on the off cycle or the off year. But the timing of that deobligation probably wouldn't happen until after the smart scale announcements. Because they're not, if they've submitted for the second year, then they're waiting on smart scale, right? To know if their project has been funded or not. So I don't know if the July timeframe works from that perspective. Or if it would be more of a fall time. Just to line up with, the smart scale process. Otherwise, I don't know when you're going to deobligate the funds, and that's assuming it's a smart scale leverage. As Darrell and others have mentioned, there's other programs out there, federal programs that have different cycles and different schedules. So that also is a factor.
Yeah, this is gonna be interesting because if everything is tied up except for the contingency we hold, right, each year,
Yeah, there's really
there
not.
won't be any money available unless you
That's just the obligated money.
I
you
think
swap
this
projects.
is still a good discussion
Yeah.
to focus on the framework, right? Because theoretically there could be balance entry in any given year that may not be fully allocated to a project. It doesn't even account for what Amy's talking about with, a project not passing their 2 gates and getting the full leveraging. So
Right.
there could be balance entry that may be available in any given year, and this will be a use for that.
Yeah.
But
And quickly, I
it
want to
all
make a
depends on the
note.
projects.
Quickly, I just want to say that, remember, our deobligation is on leveraging only. So I will
Right.
say that, and so we don't have any of the deobligation on, which would be like local projects or any projects which they just ask for the money. I think Goochland and Rico, there's others that have those types. So just to be clear that the deobligation is those leveraging requests
Right.
only.
Yeah.
Which, I know Richmond has a lot, and I think the one you have, Amy, is a leveraging big one. And so, yeah, so I think Chet We have 3 minutes. So Chessa, we can kind of, this process needs a lot of work. We just think that we did want to start to plant.
Yeah,
If we starting to beef up de-obligation, let's also like beef up, how do you get your hands on more money for the existing projects?
okay.
And potentially some new ones. So I
So
think
we'll pick up the discussion here.
Yep. And then
Okay.
that way, and then Chet, if you'll just quickly go into our next item, to give us a heads up on that prior to the finance and full body meeting, that would be great.
Sure, yes, thank you. So the other item in the agenda is a draft, well, a draft policy, we'll call it. Because right now our framework talks about, leveraging projects, and if you don't pass it 2 times, or if you don't get the funding requested 2 times, the funding could be deallocated. And before Liz raises her hand, I think we need to be clear in the framework language and even in this draft policy that it's deallocated, not deobligated. So we need to make our language say deallocated.
Deallocated. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm taking notes.
Okay.
Okay.
So this was on, let me share my screen. This was on the agenda for the Finance Committee last week, and then that meeting got canceled. So this is just information for TAC right now, but Mr. Gregory and I went through and kind of did a little bit of research looking at best practices around the country, and are using this as a basis for this, essentially a 1-page description of how deallocation should occur once a project gets to that point where the leveraging is not reached. So that addresses when there are questions according to the framework, we have the answer in this policy. So obviously I said deobligation too, so I'll change the language in this to say deallocation. But it just follows along and describes the process that's in the framework following award of CVTA regional funding to leverage. If the project sponsor is not able to obtain full funding, the estimate will be adjusted. The project sponsor may also request a new amount. This is all what's in the framework. If the project sponsor is unable to fully fund the project in the second attempt, the allocated CVTA projects will be deallocated. The following process described. So essentially 3 paragraphs at the end of this document, stating the CVTA has the authority to deallocate project funding following 2 unsuccessful attempts. The process will be initiated in both the Technical Advisory Committee and the Finance Committee, with both providing recommendations to the authority. That's up for discussion. We put that in now so that everybody gets a chance to weigh in. It could just be a Finance Committee recommendation, but at this point, I think it's worth discussion. And then the process for notifying the project sponsor and VDOT that it intends to deallocate funds and provide a reasonable opportunity to respond. If the sponsor or VDOT do not act or respond within the designated timeframe, CVTA may take action by motion or resolution to make the change and put the funding back into balance entry for the year it was committed for that project. So, I mean, it's
have
still
one
very
question.
general, but it's a little bit more concrete than what's currently in the framework.
Can you go back to that last paragraph? It sounded
Oh,
like
sure.
you're
Sorry.
looking, so VDOT needs to concur, or is VDOT concurring on their projects? Or why are they concurring on everybody's?
I think we put it in that way just to cover everything. Because
Can
some
you
of the
put it back up
projects.
so I can see it, please?
Oh, sorry. Got halfway there. You're talking about this sentence right here.
Yeah,
Project sponsor and VDOT.
but for somebody like the Sofort's project that VDOT doesn't have anything to do with, is it the 6-year improvement plan? I mean, what's the point of that?
Well, I mean, I think in general, we want everybody to be aware that this is happening, right? I mean, if TAC is not comfortable with that, I mean, it's not asking for action from VDOT.
Well,
But
it says
it's,
to provide both a reasonable opportunity to respond. So to me, for them to respond is an action. And so say for example, like, I don't know, a Hall Street project, and it's going to get deallocated, and again, if you have a reason, if it's like, again, it's in the 6-year improvement plan, and that would be good practice, but I just don't want to put, I'm not seeing that role, because, you know, aren't there
Yeah.
cases like with 64 when they got the 100 million, if they don't get it done, they'll give that back? So how can they, I mean, I'm just a little bit confused.
sure, I think that there wasn't a technical reason to do that, process wise. It doesn't require a response from VDOT. So I think that I think that it was a policy insertion more than anything, just to make sure we cover the language that might be needed, rather than having to go back after the fact and insert something back in. But if there's, I mean, I've got no problem myself taking that out if there's heartburn over it.
Yeah, and I don't know if it just says like the project sponsor and or VDOT may be the easiest fix there. Because you kind of do it like separated back at the bottom when you say project sponsor or VDOT. And so, I mean, I'm even given the flexibility with and or, because in our cases, it would be an or. In some of our cases, it would be an or.
Sure, that's no problem.
I see VDOT's hand up, Liz, and then Amy.
Thanks, Darna. One, I just kind of make 2 points. One is that we would certainly want to it would be helpful for us to know it's something we're administering. That doesn't mean it makes no difference to me how it's worded in there. I totally agree with the and or. That's one case when it would make difference. And then I just wanted to respond to you mentioning with the 100,000, for example, for I-64. Once we take CVTA money and put it into the SPA agreement, that dictates all the payback and all that stuff. You had
I'm not
mentioned,
sure what you mean.
I thought I heard you say something as an example. If VDOT doesn't spend the 100,000 on I-64, do they pay
Which
it
was
back?
for leveraging for, which I think failed did y'all get the federal dollars for the 64 project?
Yes.
Yeah. It's funded.
It's fully funded.
Oh, okay.
The 100 million is it's probably already spent. It's
Oh,
probably
Amy,
already
you know
obligated.
about the 100 million, Amy?
Pardon?
You know about the 100 million?
You know, I've heard a little bit about it.
My point was only that the SPA agreement dictates all the details about the spending and reimbursing and money that comes back that isn't spent and all that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Amy, you know I'm picking on you.
I know, it's all right. That's all right. I pick back, so it's fine. Let's see, where was I? So the unilateral deobligation is unilateral as it relates to the second year of basically not being able to have the funding or have the project funded with whatever leveraging. We're not talking about, I think what we were saying, other obligated funds for different projects. It's just leveraging projects that didn't successfully get through the second round. So my question for that, Chet, is since this is probably now on the second iteration, do you have a status of all of those projects that were submitted as leverage projects, and were they submitted on the second round? And so that we can start to track that and know, potentially what funds might become available if those projects aren't funded.
Yeah, we're tracking all that.
So is that something you could provide to us?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, anyone else have any more comments on the funding deallocation process that's going to be changed? I think all of us get a little anxiety when we talk about that, so. I'm like, Chad, you cannot have my money. It's not your money. Okay. That's my little self-talk to myself. So next is CVTA TAC member comments. Anyone have anything they would like to say to us? Say to your peers? Hearing none, our next meeting.
I just have,
there's Amy.
sorry.
Okay.
I have a question, something that I think was discussed maybe at the last CVTA meeting, but putting together the bonding package. I'm just curious as to where that stands and how that process is gonna work. And if you have any more update on that, Chet.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. And check if we could also like note to put this on the next agenda in regard to the bonding package, because I think the first start to that is TAC needs to look at the projects that they solicited in the long-term plan that we all submitted for the CVTA process. That was like $7 billion. I think we need to get those projects in front of us and say, hey, is this something that would go, be a part of what are these projects a part of things that TAC members and their localities are considering for the bonding package, or what? I think that that's a good start to at least get that in front of us, being that we all submitted those projects, and have us kind of cross-reference those to see if something has changed, which, things do change. But yeah, Chad, if we could get that on the next agenda so that we can start to take a look at that again, everybody, and it's I have it, and you can just resend out the entire list, or if you have it by locality, that would be good, just to send out to each locality and say, hey, is this a good start to the list for the bonding package conversation? Thanks, Amy. I almost forgot about that.
No problem.
Nora and then Chessa.
Hi there. So I just got back. We did a tour for the port, the Richmond Marine Terminal. And if you haven't done an in-person tour, I highly recommend it. It was fantastic. We met with the economic development folks, and I told them that I'm sure that, the bigger folks probably come and take tours and know about the space, but that some of the smaller localities may not, and that they should reach out. So hopefully they will be, but I highly encourage you to go and take an in-person tour if you haven't.
And thank you. Liz, can you check on for me, is VDOT working on the SPA agreement for the port project round 3?
I can check. Do you know anything other than just, is it the only CVTA port project?
Yes, this round.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll check for you. Yep.
Thank you.
We're working on it.
Oh, I checked.
Oh, okay, but VDOT, okay.
Yeah.
And VDOT did the other port project from Hanover last year too, right? Is that one in a SPA? Let me see. Joe, do you know if that one's in a SPA yet?
What port project are you referring to?
Wasn't it a port project round 2 that?
I got you. Yes. Correct. I'm vague, but we submitted an application on behalf of the Port of Virginia. Essentially, we acted as the sponsor, although it's not in Hanover, of course.
Oh no, I employ each of you to help the port. But I just wanted to know, had the SPA been moving for that? There's just we brought up the port, and so Liz, if you can, check on that one for me too with Liz, just to keep them, since they're not at the table.
Right.
Thank y'all. Chessa?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, so in terms of the parking lot items, in terms of urgency, so it's an even year. So if we're considering July 1 as our open intake for it, that means it's a month. We'll meet in June, and then the window will open in July and close in August if we're gonna take in off-cycle year requests. So we'll have to nail that down at the next meeting, and folks should be reviewing their projects. And
But one of my things is, like Amy was saying on the deallocation process, I think in first seeing the time frames that those things or what drops off,
Mhm.
may be helpful. And then, because, I mean, I'm just thinking about July, and that's just crazy. Like, it's just a month or so away,
Mhm.
and we have no money to be asking for projects.
Right.
So I would say that the July date is out, even though we're in an even year. So the goal needs to be sometime this year. But I
Okay.
think July is definitely gonna stretch to
Okay.
get. It's not,
Okay.
we don't even have any money.
That's what I
And
was
that
saying.
may
I
be
think
the
it's
answer.
more like a fall, winter. It just has to line up with that smart scale process, which we won't know for sure until next
Till
year,
January,
right?
February.
So,
Yeah,
they
that's
don't
what I
even know
mean.
if that cycle works, right? But that's the only
So-
place we're getting money. So, or freeing up any more money.
Yeah, and so then that does put us in the next year. So
Yeah,
we might not even be ready for this until the following year.
correct. So I think we need to be focused on that bonding package.
That's gonna come before that, huh, Amy?
That'll be for that.
So does everybody see what we're saying here? We're just kind of talking through the existing new projects conversation, dollars, when deallocation would occur. So I think this has been helpful. Chat's a little quiet. I don't know. Look at Chat. Hopefully we haven't teed off our executive director. All right. So do we have any other TAC member comments before we wrap up? Thank you for your extra 15 minutes today. Wasn't an hour or 3 hours. So I appreciate it. If there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.